Hey friends, it's Matt with Bowls, and today we are taking a look at Everdell Farshore. Everdell Farshore is a spin-off of the game Everdell, both of which are engine builder, worker placement, resource management kind of games, and functionally there's a lot of the same mechanics in both, the mechanics and systems that you'll recognize if you've played one or the other. But Farshore adds on a lot of new ideas and modifies some others, and just as much as they are the same game, they are very different in a lot of pretty major ways. So I want to go over, we're going to start with just what is Everdell Farshore and some of the basics of it, and then we're going to get into what I liked and then some of the things that I wasn't so keen about. So starting off, Everdell Farshore, as I mentioned, is a worker placement, engine builder, resource management kind of game. So at the start of the game, you're only going to have 2 workers that you're going to place. And on your turn, you are only doing one thing. It's either going to be playing a card or placing a worker and then preparing for season, which is a separate mechanic. But very basically, on your turn, you are either just placing a worker and then the various effects that will trigger, or playing a card and the various effects that will trigger. So throughout the game, you have all these different places you can go, and most of the times you are either gathering resources or gathering a card to play, but then there's also these treasure maps that you can go on, and you can sail your ship, and there's all these other systems that you engage with throughout the game. But very broadly, you are gathering resources to buy cards, to play the cards into your city, and these cards will either get you more resources or let you sort of, part of the engine builder aspect of it is you'll play a card and that card will say, every time you trigger this card, trigger all of your other cards of this type. So it's a game. Engine builders in general are really good at sort of letting you decide how you want. I mean, it's the term engine builder. It's how you get to design the engine of your game. So you can really lean into one specific type of card that really leans on gathering resources quickly. So you can buy up you build up your economy and you get to buy and, all these things, and your city is just exploding. But you can also more lean into gathering a smaller number of one specific type of cards for big points, and and then everything in between. And that's one of the best things about engine builders in general. And one thing that Everdell and Farshore and the base game both do really well is that engine builder aspect. And it just works really well with a worker placement, resource management sort of layered on top. But one of the things that really jumps out as the kind of pivotal moment when playing Everdell Farshore is, if you've never played a game like this, or specifically Everdell or Everdell Farshore, there's that moment when you feel overwhelmed by the amount of choices and options and all these different things. It just seems daunting. And it's normal and it's natural. I've been there for as many times as I have played other engine builder games. There's always that this is too much. But then, if you can just push through that, it is so satisfying and so exciting to see your engine built, right? Like, I'm the sort of person who, I play a lot of Magic the Gathering, and I really like janky combo decks that only work 5% of the time, but when they do, it's great. Those are the decks that I like, when this triggers that, triggers this, triggers that, and then it just goes. If you are that sort of person, you will love the Everdell series and Farshore as well. So there's that moment, like I said, of overwhelm, but right past it, it's like this moment where everything clicks, and it's usually the first time that there's kind of a chain of events. So you'll play one card, and also, especially because you only start with so few, start with 2 workers, which feels so small. They're like, on the first season, the first round, I can't do anything. I have all these options. I have so many things that I need, but only 2 workers to do it. But then suddenly you play one of your workers and you pick up this resource, and then you notice, oh wait, when I did that, I also got some of these treasure tokens, and the treasure tokens I can spend to play cards. And when I play this card, that lets me gather more resources, or it lets me play one of my other cards for cheaper. And then it starts to like really snowball of what this one little worker did suddenly turns into this whole, turn of this and that and this and that. And I love games that do that. But therein also kind of lies the problem where that moment of, hesitation and uncertainty, if you're not the sort of person who is willing to push through that, especially if you're kind of newer to these sorts of games, it's going to be tough. But if you can stick with it, I promise it's such a good game. I really love the Everdell series in general. And then also, if you are ever so, overwhelmed by Everdell or Everdell Farshore, there's also My Little Everdell, which we have reviewed before, which takes a lot of the same ideas and really kind of like lessens the complexity. It takes out a lot of the resource management is still there. They still have the treasure map equivalent. They call them parades, but there's always, something similar. And they let you sort of dip your toes into the waters of the Everdell series in a way that is really enjoyable. It is sort of posed as a children's game, as My Little Everdell, but it's still a really good game. So that would be kind of one of my biggest hesitations with introducing this game to someone, because it sort of has like a bell curve of interest for new players, I think, because the art style is so cute and friendly, and you describe it as like, oh, you're just little forest critters trying to build your town, and you hire other friends and you gather sticks and leaves and rocks, and it's like, it sounds so child friendly, and it is, obviously, but then you hit that moment of like, oh, this is a deeply strategic game. Like, it's not complicated. The rules itself aren't complicated to understand, but it takes a while to really wrap your head around the options and then the systems of the game as well, because didn't even touch on the various systems, because there is a lot in Everdell Farshore that doesn't really exist in the other Everdell games. Especially one of the ones that I did really like is they included a solo mode where you go up against Captain Bonnie, who's this crab pirate, and there's a system for, automatically generating a second player that works really well. By the way, I did like they have this reminder card or task card, I think, and it just sort of directs how she buys which cards and builds her own engine in that way. But then, it adds on a lot of additional rules of she doesn't have to worry about resources and things like that. Anyway, but the inclusion of there's this sailing thing that you can do where, like, every time you match one of these windrose tiles in the cards you play, because they have different symbols and keywords, and anytime you match one, your boat gets to sail around the shoal here, and as you do, you earn more points, and then you earn treasure tokens, which can be spent to as either points, if saved until the end for points, or used as any resource. So there are, and then there's the different seasons, As soon as you can't play anything, you have to end the season, which gets you a little bonus, and then you do some things and move around the board and what have you. But so my point being, there is a layer of Farshore that doesn't exist in the base game that adds new ideas, new mechanics, and then, sort of shuffles some of the old ones around from the base game, and does so in a really satisfying way. If you're looking for a game that really, like, Everdell might be, I haven't checked, but Everdell might be one of my favorite engine building series. Obviously, there's a lot, and I do really like them a lot, but in terms of that balance of complexity and accessibility, it does lean a little more into the complex side, but not so much that it's overwhelming. It's just, I think for new players, there's always going to be that moment of like hesitation where they're sitting with their single worker that they get to place on their turn, wondering how they're going to deal with all of this. But my recommendation to those players, or if you know anyone, my recommendation for what to tell them is just pick a thing. Just do a thing, and then it'll all sort of reveal itself in time. And even potentially something I have done in the past is, especially with a lot of these engine builder games, it can feel like it's worth going through a round and then, excuse me, it's worth going through a round, seeing how the systems work and how all the different pieces interact, and then completely starting over. Because your first couple turns are pretty important for, getting that tempo that you need. And it can feel like, especially in your first game, you're getting towards the end. Not that it's a long game. It takes probably like 60 to 90 minutes, if I had to guess. But when you're getting through your first game, halfway through, it can feel like, oh, I really should have done this other thing on my first turn. So I recommend, and this is true for a lot of games, by the way, I recommend letting new players take a turn or two, get the ideas down, then completely start over. Like, start a new game, because I think once they see how things can work, it's going to be much easier on their second time through, but without the necessary kind of slog of having to go through their first game with we'll call it a faulty start. So that's my recommendation to any new players or anyone who picks this up and feels overwhelmed by it. Just give it a shot. Just do a thing. It doesn't matter what it is. Don't worry about optimizing it. Don't worry about getting all the best points. Just pick something and do it. And suddenly, I promise, everything will click, and you'll get that rush of euphoria that I feel every time I see some contraption all coming together. So if that sounds interesting, please go check out Everdell Farshore. Great game overall. Fantastic engine builder worker placement game. If this video was at all helpful or informational or insightful or whatever, please consider giving it a like, and be sure to subscribe for more tabletop gaming news and reviews. Again, I am Matt with Bowls. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.